The conference room in downtown Denver went dead silent as my manager balled up 6 months of my design work and tossed it into the trash like a used napkin. "This is junk, Marcus," she said flatly, making eye contact with the entire UX team. "Start from scratch, and this time, try not to waste company resources." What Sheila didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that my phone had been vibrating every 10 minutes for the past hour. Not from friends. From an executive recruiter at Orion Systems, one of the biggest enterprise software firms in the country. And while Sheila thought she was tearing down my confidence, she was actually setting the stage for the biggest break of my life. But let me back up. It was 10 months ago when I joined Clearline Technologies as a user experience specialist. I was 39, looking for a stable role after a rough layoff. Clearline promised innovation and ownership. What they failed to mention was that my boss, Sheila Grant, ran the design department like a dictatorship. Nothing got approved unless it was her idea, and if you dared to think creatively, you were not a team player. Sheila had been at Clearline just under 2 years. Long enough to dig in, not long enough to understand the clients. While competitors rolled out streamlined dashboards and AI-assisted reporting tools, we were still pushing clunky menus that hadn't changed since 2009. From day one, I knew we had a usability crisis. Clients like Tracy at Alpine Textiles were taking 25 minutes to process basic invoices. Devin from Redridge Logistics had opened 17 support tickets in a single month just to navigate our dashboard. These weren't training issues. They were usability failures. So I stayed late, sketched prototypes, spoke with clients. Over 5 months, I developed a clean, intuitive redesign of our interface one that required fewer clicks, eliminated redundancies, and adapted to each user's workflow. I even tested it live with a few of our friendlier accounts. Tracy's processing time dropped from 25 minutes to under 5. Devin sent 0 tickets for the first time in 2 years. But when I presented my work to Sheila, she barely looked at it. She called it unauthorized and a distraction, then scheduled the infamous team meeting where she humiliated me in front of everyone. While she was tearing pages, my future was ringing in. Orion Systems wanted to talk. And they weren't just offering praise, they were offering leadership. And Sheila, she was about to learn what happens when innovation gets tossed in the trash. I spent evenings and weekends polishing every detail, turning my prototype into something that could genuinely transform how our clients interacted with Clearline software. The interface wasn't just a fresh coat of paint, it was a complete rethinking of usability, built with real feedback from real users. The results were everything I hoped for. Tracy from Alpine Textiles dropped her invoice processing time from 25 minutes to under 5. Devin at Redridge Logistics hadn't logged a single support ticket since switching to the redesigned layout. "It's like you finally gave us software from this decade," one of them joked. But Sheila, she had 0 interest in any idea she hadn't originated herself. When I mentioned the improvements in team meetings, her reaction was always the same. "We have a process, Marcus. Rogue projects aren't part of it." She shut the conversation down every time. Soon she moved me to nothing but maintenance, small bug fixes, documentation cleanup, support task reviews, work that needed doing. Sure, but none of it tapped into what I actually brought to the table. Meanwhile, I kept refining the interface during off hours, each iteration smarter and more client-centric. I wasn't trying to be subversive or make Sheila look bad. I truly believed that if she saw the impact this redesign could have, she'd get behind it. After all, we were losing clients over outdated systems. This was a fix one backed by data, user testing, and results. Turns out, I completely misread her. The turning point came during a quarterly strategy session. Our CEO, Daniel Ramirez, was addressing customer churn and growing concerns about our software's outdated UX. "We need to modernize," he said. "Our competitors are wiping the floor with us on usability." I saw my moment. After the meeting, I approached Sheila with a neatly organized folder, screenshots, testimonials, side-by-side comparisons, and a performance summary. "I've been working on something that could help," I said, placing the folder on her desk. "It's a fully tested redesign addressing the exact issues Daniel mentioned. Clients love it." She flipped through the materials like they were a magazine she didn't subscribe to. Marcus, this is exactly the kind of distraction I've been trying to avoid. You weren't hired to redesign our platform based on your personal opinions. You're here to maintain what we already have. That moment told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't protecting the company. She was protecting her ego. Sheila barely glanced at the user feedback or performance metrics before slamming the folder shut. I want you to drop this and focus on your assigned responsibilities, she said dismissively. But I couldn't walk away. I knew what I had built was more than a pet project. The interface wasn't just cleaner, it was faster, simpler, and actually solved the problems our users had been complaining about for years. Client testimonials called it the easiest software they'd ever used. The data showed a 70% drop in support tickets, and some users cut their task completion time in half. It was real progress. So I did something risky. I added a 15-minute demo to the next team meeting agenda. Nothing flashy, just a walkthrough of the improvements, a chance to let the team see the results and decide for themselves if it was worth pursuing. Word got out fast. 2 hours before the meeting, Sheila summoned me to her office. She was fuming. "I specifically told you to stop working on this," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "And now you've scheduled a presentation behind my back. I just thought if the team could see the actual results I started." "I don't care about results," she snapped. "I care about structure, about respecting authority. And you've clearly shown you don't." She canceled the presentation and sent an email to the team reminding them that only approved projects would be discussed during meetings. But the damage was already done. Whispers circulated across the dev floor. People started approaching me in the break room. "Hey, Marcus, can I see that redesign you've been working on?" Others messaged privately curious about what clients had been raving about. Even Daniel, our CEO, asked Sheila about the redesign project I've been hearing buzz about. Instead of addressing the interest, Sheila doubled down on control. She issued a new policy: no development outside of formally assigned tickets. She required daily status updates and discouraged any side initiatives. "Innovation belongs to leadership," she said in an all-hands meeting, "not individuals." Then came the project review meeting. If this story made you pause even for a moment and think about how quiet perseverance can outlast loud authority, then you're exactly who I want to build this space with. Subscribe to the channel, not just to hear how this story unfolds, but to stand with the ones who've been overlooked, underestimated, and told to stay in their lane. Because in the next part, you'll see exactly what happened. When Sheila's downfall wasn't just professional. It became a cautionary tale in every boardroom that once ignored the voice of the user. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Sheila had somehow gotten hold of the interface files I'd been updating during my lunch breaks. Despite them being developed on personal time and hardware, she viewed it as insubordination. She called the entire development team, 12 people, into the main conference room. Laying printed screenshots across the table like court evidence, she began tearing them up one by one. "I want everyone to see what happens when you ignore direct instructions," she declared. "This is what wasted time looks like." Sheila picked up the first page and a screenshot of the redesigned dashboard users had described as intuitive, modern, and finally making sense. She held it up high for everyone to see and slowly tore it in half. "This is garbage," she said flatly, letting the torn halves drop into the trash beside her. Then she picked up the next sheet, client testimonials, raving about improved navigation time savings and reduced errors. She ripped that too. Garbage, she repeated as each new page user. Feedback visual mock-ups, analytics charts was destroyed and discarded like it meant nothing. Page after page of my 6 months of work was reduced to scraps in front of a stunned room of developers. "Marcus," she finally said, turning her gaze to me, "this is what happens when you waste time on projects no one asked for. You've built something no one authorized to solve problems that don't even exist." I sat there, jaw-tight, heat creeping up my neck. No one met my eyes. A few of them had seen the redesign privately. They knew what it was capable of. But no one was going to stand up to Sheila, not after that brutal performance. She continued her lecture. "Focus on your assigned tasks. Innovation doesn't come from side projects. It comes from following established procedures. The humiliation was complete. 6 months of dedication, nights, weekends, user interviews, all thrown into a trash can while 12 teammates sat silently watching. But while Sheila believed she was making an example out of me, she didn't realize my phone had been buzzing throughout the meeting. After we were dismissed, I stepped out into the hallway and checked my voicemail. It was from David Park, a senior director at Sage Tech Industries. We had crossed paths briefly at a UX summit 8 months ago. Marcus. The message began, "This is David Park from Sage Tech. We've been hearing great things about a user interface prototype you developed at Clearline. Several of our enterprise clients mentioned seeing early versions. They're calling it a game changer." I listened again. Then a third time. While Sheila was tearing apart my work, one of the biggest software companies in the country was actively seeking me out because of it. I called David back immediately. "Thanks for calling," he said. "We've tracked the client feedback, and we're confident you're the one behind these improvements. We'd like to discuss a senior position at Sage Tech One with creative freedom and the resources to take your ideas even further." David explained that Sage Tech had been wrestling with similar usability issues across their product ecosystem for years. They'd hired consultants, outsourced redesigns, even built internal UX task forces, but none of it delivered the level of user satisfaction they were now hearing about from Clearline clients. "We'd like to bring you on as our senior interface architect," he said. "You'd have full autonomy over experience design across the entire platform." Then came the part that stopped me cold. "The compensation package starts at $180,000 annually, plus equity and a $50,000 signing bonus." I had to mute my mic just to breathe. $180,000. That was more than double what I made at Clearline. And here was a Fortune 100 software firm telling me they not only believed in my work, they were giving me the keys to lead. "There's one more thing," David added. "We understand you can't bring any proprietary code. That's fine. But design thinking, insight, and problem solving, that's yours. That's what we're hiring." We talked for another 45 minutes. By the end, I had a formal offer in my inbox and a start date just 3 weeks away. It wasn't just a job offer, it was validation. It was freedom. When I walked back into Clearline's office, Sheila was still in the conference room standing at the front like nothing had happened, lecturing the team on procedure while my torn-up designs sat in the trash behind her. I knocked on the glass and waited for her to acknowledge me. "What is it, Marcus?" she asked, irritated. "I just wanted to let you know I'm resigning effective immediately," I said, calm and measured. "I'll be joining Sage Tech as their senior interface architect." The room froze. Sheila blinked. "You can't just quit during a team meeting," she stammered. "There are protocols. Notice handoff's transition steps." I held up my phone, the signed offer letter on the screen. "Actually, my contract allows for immediate resignation in cases of obstructed professional growth. Having 6 months of work destroyed in front of a team qualifies." Daniel Ramirez, our CEO, had been quietly observing near the back. He stepped forward. "Maybe we should discuss this privately before any rash decisions are made." But I was done being quiet. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, gathering the last of my things. "You taught me what happens when innovation is ignored. Now I get to build somewhere it's celebrated." Sheila had chosen to humiliate me in front of the entire team, so it felt fitting that she hear my decision in the same way, loud, clear, and public. "There's nothing to discuss," I said calmly, picking up the folder that hadn't been torn apart and slipping it into my bag. "My decision is final." As I walked toward the door of the conference room, I could feel every eye on me. 12 co-workers. Some stunned, some impressed, a few, already weighing their own futures. I didn't blame them. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had heard the numbers and seen the work. "Marcus," Sheila called out, her voice cracking. "You're making a huge mistake. Sage Tech is a corporate machine. You won't have creative freedom there." I stopped at the doorway and turned. We'll see which approach wins in the long-run, innovation or blind procedure. Within 24 hours, I had boxed up my desk-completed HR paperwork and officially stepped into my new role at Sage Tech Industries. Their Denver office was 3 times the size of Clearline's, equipped with cutting-edge tools and filled with cross-disciplinary teams tackling complex design problems. More importantly, it was a culture that valued solving real problems, not just checking boxes. But the real affirmation of my decision came not from my shiny new office or fancy job title. It came in the weeks that followed, when I watched the slow unraveling of Sheila's kingdom at Clearline. I hadn't reached out to any clients. I didn't poach. I didn't send one sales message. All I did was update my professional profile to reflect my new role and kept building solutions the way I always had. In my second week, David Park mentioned a call from Alpine Textiles. They're exploring options, he said. Apparently, someone they'd worked with before had made their lives a lot easier. They were excited to hear that person's now with us. That someone, of course, was me. By the end of that same week, we got another inquiry, this time from Redridge Logistics. Devin, the logistics lead, who had once opened a support ticket every few days, wanted to talk about a software suite that actually understood workflow. Week by week, the pattern repeated. I wasn't pushing. I wasn't chasing. Clients who had benefited from the very interface Sheila called garbage were looking for the person behind it and finding him at Sage Tech. It wasn't revenge. It was validation, served naturally, one phone call at a time. Clients who had benefited from the interface improvements I designed didn't need convincing. They were already reaching out, curious, optimistic, and eager to keep building with someone who had actually solved their problems. I wasn't cold calling. I wasn't sending flashy brochures or scheduling demos. I was just available, listening, responding with the same care and logic I'd always used, only now I had the tools and backing of Sage Tech Industries to build the solutions they deserved. Meanwhile, back at Clearline Technologies, Sheila was starting to realize what she'd really torn up in that conference room. Through mutual connections in Denver's professional network, I began hearing whispers of her growing panic. She'd started making calls, routine check-ins, she claimed, but found herself hitting walls. Clients she had assumed were loyal were now evaluating, declining renewals, asking hard questions. Alpine Textiles had informed her they wouldn't be extending their support contract. We're exploring other options, they told her, without elaborating. Redridge Logistics responded similarly, saying they'd found a team that better understands our workflow. That team, of course, was us at Sage Tech. Sheila had assumed client loyalty came from relationships and a polished brand. But what she failed to understand was that loyalty comes from results, from tools that save time, from user experiences that feel like they were designed by someone who actually listens. 3 weeks after I left, I got a call that made it crystal clear just how deeply Sheila had miscalculated. It was Tracy, the accounting lead at Alpine Textiles. Sheila called me yesterday, she said, half amused, half annoyed, wanted to know if we were unhappy with service. I told her we were moving to Sage Tech because of you, because what you built worked. Then Tracy chuckled. She told me I was making an emotional decision, that I was prioritizing user convenience over vendor history. Can you believe that she was telling me how to run my software? That conversation told me everything I needed to know about why Clearline was bleeding clients. Even with the evidence in front of her, Sheila still believed control was more important than outcomes. By the end of my first month at Sage Tech, 8 former Clearline clients had either fully transitioned or opened talks with our sales team. These weren't throwaway accounts, these were cornerstone partnerships. Sheila hadn't just dismissed a project. She'd discarded the one thing that was keeping her client base from walking out the door. Those 8 clients represented over 40% of Clearline Technologies' annual revenue. And again, I hadn't recruited them. I hadn't sent a single proposal. I was simply there doing the same thing I always had, listening, improving, and now working for a company with the resources to bring those improvements to life. Sage Tech's growth rate surged past projections, up 300% in just 1 quarter. Meanwhile, back at Clearline, the client exodus became a full-blown crisis. Contracts vanished. Renewal discussions dried up. The company was suddenly battling the worst retention collapse in its history. And while the money recognition and leadership role at Sage Tech were beyond anything I'd ever dreamed of, that wasn't the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part was knowing Sheila had created every bit of this fallout herself. She could have supported my redesign. She could have read the client feedback. She could have seen the writing on the wall and chosen collaboration over control. But instead, she tore months of research and real-world results to pieces, literally just to assert authority. 2 months after I left, word spread through the Denver tech community. Daniel Ramirez, Clearline's CEO, had called an emergency board meeting. The topic, revenue collapse, rising churn, and growing fears of a buyout just to keep the company afloat. Sheila, who once ruled the dev team like a gatekeeper, was now scrambling to explain how nearly half of their top-tier clients had walked away in under 8 weeks. According to several former colleagues, she initially tried to pin the blame on me, accusing me of unethical behavior and suggesting I'd stolen clients or shared proprietary designs. But her timeline fell apart quickly. The clients hadn't left the moment I did. They left when they were forced back onto Clearline's old clunky interface, when the improvements they'd tested and praised vanished, when the company showed them that their feedback didn't matter. The board conducted its own review. The conclusion, predictable. Clients don't stay because a company follows procedures. They stay because their problems get solved efficiently, intuitively, and consistently. Sheila had spent months rejecting those very improvements. And now she was watching the consequences play out in real time. Then came the call. 3 months after my resignation, Daniel himself reached out. "Marcus, I'd like to talk about a possible partnership," he said. "Would Sage Tech be open to acquiring Clearline's remaining clients? Maybe even onboard some of our staff?" The same company that once labeled my work unauthorized was now offering me the keys to what was left. The same company that once called my work unauthorized garbage was now looking to sell off its remaining assets to the very firm built on the user-first principles Sheila had dismissed. During our call, Daniel Ramirez admitted they were reevaluating their leadership structure. Reading between the lines, I didn't need him to say it. Sheila's days at Clearline were clearly numbered. Then came the part I didn't expect. "I have to ask Daniel," said his tone cautious. "What would it take to bring you back as head of software development? We're prepared to offer significant compensation and full autonomy over interface strategy." The irony hit hard. 3 months after watching my work get shredded in front of my peers, I was now being asked to return not just as a team member, but as the very leader whose vision they once rejected. But I didn't need to think long. "I appreciate the offer," I told him honestly, "but I'm happy at Sage Tech." They understood the value of user-centered design from the beginning. They didn't have to lose clients to recognize it. 6 months after joining Sage Tech, I'd been promoted to Director of User Experience. I now oversaw design strategy across multiple product lines and held equity in a company that treated innovation as culture, not disruption. The clients who followed me from Clearline became the foundation for our most successful quarter to date. We weren't just building features, we were building trust. Back at Clearline, things went as Daniel had euphemistically described strategic restructuring. They laid off 40% of the staff, sold their main office in Denver, and eventually merged with a firm that prioritized structure and compliance over innovation. Sheila wasn't part of the transition team. I learned of her departure through LinkedIn and quiet whispers in the industry. Former colleagues shared how in her final months, she tried to win clients back with the same tone-deaf focus on procedures that had driven them away. She never understood the root of the problem. It wasn't her technical skills. It wasn't her background. It was her rigid belief that following internal process was more important than solving client problems. The last I heard, she was struggling to find a comparable role. Hiring managers were wary of someone whose leadership style had contributed to a high-profile client collapse. I didn't celebrate her fall. I didn't need to. The satisfaction came in knowing that the same principles she rejected, flexibility, empathy, real-world usability, were now industry standards. Every major firm was investing in UX research. Every smart team was building around solving real problems. Exactly the way I had all along. Every successful tech firm in the industry had now embraced the exact philosophy Sheila once labeled unauthorized distraction. She had misunderstood everything: what clients valued, what fueled lasting partnerships, and what real innovation actually looked like. And her downfall didn't come from a scheme or a carefully orchestrated takedown. It came from one moment of arrogance when she chose to publicly destroy the work that had been quietly holding her company together. That's the elegance of it. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't explosive, it's natural. You simply step aside and let someone's worst instincts destroy everything they thought they controlled. Today, exactly 1 year after watching Sheila tear up my interface designs in front of 12 stunned coworkers, I now lead the user experience division at one of the fastest-growing software companies in North America. Our success is grounded in the very principle she rejected, that great software begins with understanding real users and solving real problems, not clinging to rigid policies that ignore what people actually experience. I spend every day working with clients who value empathy, clarity, and functionality. We listen, we adapt, and most importantly, we build tools that make their jobs easier, not more complicated. And every time I see a client smile during a demo, every time we launch a feature that cuts a process from 30 minutes to 3, I think back to that conference room, to the scraps of paper in that trash can, to the silence. Sheila thought she was sending a message about authority, but what she really did was tear up the only thing keeping her professional credibility intact. What she destroyed wasn't just a side project, it was the very foundation of client trust. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't about striking back. It's about building something better in a place that actually deserves you. If you've ever watched your work get dismissed by someone who didn't understand its value, if you've ever had to walk away so you could grow, this story is for you. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you not just for watching, but for hearing me out. Because when Sheila ripped my work in half in front of a room full of silent faces, I honestly thought that might be the end of my story. But it turns out it was only the beginning. Now I want to hear from you. And 2, have you ever poured your heart into something only to have someone in power dismiss it like it meant nothing? Have you ever watched innovation be crushed under the weight of ego? Tell me in the comments, share your story. Because someone out there needs to know they're not alone, and your words might be the thing that gives them the courage to stand up, walk away, or start something better. If you're stuck in a place where your voice is constantly ignored, let me offer this. You don't have to fight them to win. You just have to keep building, keep solving real problems, keep listening. The right people will notice. And when they do, you'll realize you were never the problem. They were just the wrong audience. So if this story resonated with you, hit that like button, not just for me, but for every quiet innovator who's ever been called too independent, too idealistic, or too much. And subscribe if you believe that real leadership isn't about control, it's about vision, courage, and knowing when to step out of the room that no longer deserves you. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's thriving somewhere better. And trust me, that part feels even better than I imagined.